What happens when a young African leader dares to speak truth to one of the most powerful religious figures in the world? What if this message challenges centuries of silence, injustice, and spiritual domination? This is the story of a bold message from Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso to Pope Leo XIV, and it shook the world. The unlikely letter. Footage of Ouagadougou, young soldiers working in the fields, and Captain Ibrahim Traoré addressing his people. It began not with a declaration of war, but with a letter. A message penned in calm but resolute words, addressed to the Vatican. It came from a man who wears a military uniform, but speaks more like a teacher than a general. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the 36-year-old interim president of Burkina Faso, wrote a message that echoed across continents. To Pope Leo XIV, the supreme head of the Catholic Church, he wrote, "Your Holiness, I write not to accuse, but to awaken. I write as a son of Africa, not in rebellion, but in truth." The letter did not come through diplomatic channels. It was published publicly, translated into multiple languages, and shared on African and international platforms. Why? Because this was not just a political message, it was a spiritual statement. The weight of history. Black and white photos of colonial missionaries, European kings, and African children in mission schools. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's message opened old wounds. In his letter, he revisited the dark past where religion was used as a tool of colonization. He reminded Pope Leo XIV that European missionaries, under papal blessing, often accompanied the armies that carved Africa apart. "The gospel came to us wrapped in chains," he wrote. "We were baptized with one hand, while the other took our gold, our land, our names." He spoke of how African languages were banned in Christian schools, how traditional spiritual systems were demonized, how popes of the past issued bulls, official church decrees blessing the discovery and domination of African peoples. Captain Ibrahim Traoré did not blame the faith. He blamed the misuse of it. Christ spoke of love and liberation, but in Africa, his name was often used to justify slavery and silence. This part of the message struck nerves both in Rome and in African churches. The courage to confront. Footage of Captain Ibrahim Traoré at a podium, addressing African youth, intercut with images of cathedrals and African traditional ceremonies. For Captain Ibrahim Traoré, this message was not a rejection of religion, but a call for reconciliation. He called on the Vatican to recognize its role in Africa's colonial past, not just with words, but with concrete action. Let the Church return our history. Let it support the healing of what was broken, not with gold, but with truth. He demanded the return of sacred African artifacts held in the Vatican vaults. He asked for transparency on the missionary records kept during colonization. And most of all, he called for a Vatican-led Day of Truth and Apology across the African continent. "The time has come," he wrote, "for the Church not to lead us, but to walk beside us." These words were shared across African WhatsApp groups, read aloud in student circles, and discussed on local radio stations from Accra to Kinshasa. The Vatican responds. Footage of St. Peter's Basilica. News anchors reporting reactions from the Vatican press office. Within a week, the Vatican press office responded. Their message was cautious, respectful. They acknowledged the pain of Africa's past and promised a future of dialogue. But there was no formal apology. Pope Leo XIV, a scholar of African theology, gave a homily days later in St. Peter's Basilica. "The Church must be humble enough to listen," he said. "We must ask not only how we spread the faith, but at what cost it was spread." Though he never named Captain Ibrahim Traoré directly, the message was clear. The door had been opened, but Captain Ibrahim Traoré's supporters weren't satisfied with words. The same church that canonized missionaries who supported colonizers must now canonize truth, said one youth leader in Senegal. The Continental Awakening. Footage of interfaith African youth gatherings, mosques and churches side by side, traditional dances beside choirs. Across the continent, the letter ignited a spark. African theologians, imams, priests, and traditional healers came together in conferences, asking, "What does spiritual sovereignty mean for Africa today?" Captain Ibrahim Traoré's letter was printed in newspapers in Kenya, Mali, Benin, and South Africa. Young Africans took to social media with the hashtag faith and freedom, and Captain Ibrahim Traoré to the Pope Leo XIV, and in Burkina Faso, something extraordinary happened. Church leaders, Catholic, Protestant, and Orthodox publicly invited traditional spiritual leaders for joint ceremonies of remembrance and healing. For the first time in over 100 years, African drums echoed inside old cathedrals. It wasn't rebellion, it was restoration, a new doctrine of respect. African leaders drafting new education policies, African priests in Rome, and Vatican diplomats in African capitals. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's message went beyond religion. He proposed a new policy in Burkina Faso. All schools, religious or not, must teach African history, indigenous belief systems, and the impact of colonization. He called it the curriculum of consciousness, and religious institutions were encouraged, not forced, to open their archives to historians. "We are not asking for domination," he said, "only for dignity." Soon, other African leaders began to echo similar sentiments. Senegal's president spoke of spiritual decolonization. Tanzania introduced a course on pre-colonial African spirituality. Ghana began returning church-owned lands to traditional councils. Even some Vatican cardinals supported the idea of African spiritual heritage being honored within the church's framework. A proposal was floated to canonize African martyrs not only of Roman persecution, but of European colonization. The global reaction. Captain Ibrahim Traoré challenges the Vatican. Spiritual decolonization begins. Africa's new voice. The world watched in awe. Western media painted Captain Ibrahim Traoré as a rebel and visionary. Some called him divisive. Others hailed him as a prophet of post-colonial truth. African elders saw him as the voice of their ancestors, and young Africans saw him as something more. A leader not afraid to confront empires, not with war, but with wisdom. The Vatican's silence after the homily was not seen as weakness but as contemplation. In Rome, whispers began of a possible papal trip to Africa, not to preach, but to listen. A message echoing through time over the Sahel. Children laughing, farmers planting trees, a church bell ringing next to a talking drum. Captain Ibrahim Traoré did not declare a war on faith. He declared a war on forgetting. A call to the Vatican. A message to all spiritual leaders that Africa remembers its stories, its spirits, its stolen past, and its sacred future. "We do not reject the faith," he wrote. "We reject the silence." And in doing so, he spoke not only to Pope Leo XIV, but to every African soul that ever wondered if their ancestors still had a voice. Now they do, and it speaks with the fire of truth. Support African storytelling. Share this video with someone who believes in truth, history, and healing. If this story sparked something in you, hit that like button, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories from across the world. Bye, Africa Lights.